Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today, February 17th. I am Marsh, joined by Rick Blaze. Good morning, Rick. How are you?
Good morning. It is President's Day. I don't really care less about that, but I'm glad to have the day off. From people who get to have the day off can have the day off. That's cool.
Well, I do not have the day off, so lucky you. We have plenty to get to. We had no day off in the SWBA last night as the All-Star game rolled on. We'll start there. We also got a little top 25 and some SEC conversation, but back to the top. All-Star game, the new format unveiled yesterday. Rick, what were your initial takeaways with a game that looked a little bit more competitive, but certainly also had some detractors within it?
The format overall. I didn't know how I was going to like it. There's a lot of things to take away from this. First of all, I liked it because the games were competitive. And we haven't seen that in a while. We haven't seen guys actually trying to play defense, actually trying to get stops. Things that was not great, I don't think. I think Draymond Green had a point about having guys who are not all-stars or rookies playing on the all-star court. I can see how, hey, I've worked my entire career to have an opportunity to be an all-star, and these guys are just showing up on the court as regular Joes, and all of a sudden they're playing on the court that I've worked my entire career to be on. I understand that. They did play hard, though, so I give them credit. And I do think that it was some motivation for the all-stars to not to lose to some non-all-stars, right? So I think that was added motivation, but I think overall the concept of the game was not bad. I think there's some tweaking needs to go on. That little halftime performance in between the things was kind of crazy, and that was a long, drawn-out situation. But overall, I liked it. I think there's some things that needs to be changed, but overall, it's not a bad format. I was pleasantly surprised at the competitiveness between the teams.
Well, the Sunday was the encapsulation of the SWBA as a whole, right? On the one hand, you have a league that's trying to change things up to be able to give a product that is entertaining to the fans. And at the same time, the stewards of said product do a fantastic job of getting in the way and stumbling all over it. Let's start with Draymond Green, because let's start with this first. I liked it. I liked the format. I thought the games were competitive. There were certainly moments where there was no defense, and I think some of the players were still acting like it was an old school all-star game, but there were a number of guys, mostly the younger guys, that were playing competitive basketball. That was great. But there's two things that happened. That's the league getting in its own way. It's players getting in its own way. The comments by Draymond Green. He's saying, "No, I don't like this. We're doing this just because of ratings. We're doing it because of ratings because you and every other All-Star has refused to show up for the last 5 years. Like, this is not a good product. The league has no other choice but to infuse change in it. Could they have gone a route that wasn't Rising Stars? Probably. I think you could do 4 teams with fewer roster spots per team. I don't think we need wholesale hockey rotation changes for each team. But the fact that we're here is because guys like you don't show up on Sunday and you don't play basketball to be a competitive or at least entertaining brand. It doesn't have to be competitive, but at least make it look like you're not trying to get to 300 combined points. And then meanwhile, you've got LeBron James who decides 1 hour before the game starts, you know what? Ankle injury, foot injury, I'm going to rest. Let somebody else in. The same with Anthony Edwards, the same with Giannis Antetokounmpo. We've got guys that actually want to be there, and we've got LeBron James is holding out his roster spot like it's a hostage just so he can sit there with his backwards hat, walk out with no uniform on, and act like he's a 21-time All-Star. He is voted wise, but he didn't show up and play the game. This is the players getting in the way of the league. I have zero sympathy for the players in this one, and I'm typically pro player, and I 100% understand the frustrations that people like Adam Silver have with their players, guys like Larry Bird who are begging people to be competitive because they don't show up, and 2 very vocal names or the biggest name in the sport didn't show up on Sunday for a product that I thought was fantastic.
And you know what? And it's hard to argue that point. I see you coming out guns a-blazing this morning, Marsh, and I'm not mad at that. Those are very valid points. And again, the players that before now, the current players is the reason why they had to try all these desperation acts. Sidebar, I'm glad to see that the dunk contest was decent. It's been some years since we had a good dunk contest.
It would be great if we actually had profession. I mean, I know he's a pro, but it'd be great if we had SWBA guys in there. I mean, willing to participate as well.
Well,
Another
yes,
example
yeah,
of
yeah. But I think this is a step forward to like maybe a John Morant go in this next year. Maybe some of those guys maybe participate. I
these
think it's
guys
a
have
step.
too much
I think it's a
ego
step
to it.
forward in the right direction.
Let's hope. Let's hope. And I will reiterate, I thought the format was great. I think playing a 40 was a little too much. I talked more about this on the pod this afternoon. But to your point, the long breaks, and it's interesting. There's a story out right now that talks about the players kind of being upset about the long breaks and being like,
Yeah,
well, this
that's
kind of
not
was a
good.
buzzkill. Well,
Cause
the
you got to
players,
rev yourself back up as a player. That's
100%.
not
No, I know.
good.
I agree. I agree. The ironic part, or not the ironic part, the interesting part of the players who are quoted in this article is Jaylen Brown, SGA, and Trae Young. Three guys who I thought had some of the highest effort put out there in the games that they played. I thought there's no coincidence. The guys that are saying this was stupid to the ones that said, oh, I actually want to compete. And I thought all three of those guys did just that. All right, speaking of competition, let's move to college basketball where the SP Top 25 is back out. Duke, despite the loss, retains their number one spot. Much of the top five remains identical, though Princeton reaches a new school high at number 7. Rick, your takeaways from the latest SP Top 25?
I mean, for the most part, I think we're entering the world or the part of the season where the top 25 is almost on cruise control. I think the records and the wins and the losses start to kind of settle and do themselves. A lot of stuff now becomes nitpicking. Some can argue that Duke maybe shouldn't have retained number one spot after losing. You know, and to who they lost to. I don't think they should be number one. You lost to Florida State. You lost to Florida State. You lost to Florida State. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Florida State is not sniffing the top 25. They have like 7 wins on the season. I also think Alabama probably deserves to be in the top 3 at 18-2. Especially if Duke is going to hold on number 1 after just losing to Florida State. So, but I'm nitpicking, right? So I think now we get into the realm of the part of the season where it's small, minute things that people have discussions with, depending on your favorite teams or whatnot. So it's nitpicking, but overall, it should be decent just moving forward with the SW or the SP25 unless something egregious just happens.
I don't disagree with the SP on this one. I think keeping that Duke at number 1 because, yeah, they lost, but I think that this is, to your point.
That was a bad loss, though. A very bad
loss. But that doesn't suddenly make them worse than Texas, worse than Villanova. And I think that that's what, because it's not, I mean, Texas, Villanova, 3 losses apiece. Now, they didn't have the loss as the number 1 team in the country on their resume, but they have not been unblemished. If you had a team that was 16-1 sitting right behind there, I could understand the argument. But to me, Duke,
Alabama's 18 and
you have,
only have 2 losses.
You do, but you have a larger sample size to say, okay, we shouldn't be making. Okay, now that we've seen them play 20 games, we have a better idea of who they are as a basketball team. One game shouldn't move that trigger drastically. I'm not talking about record-wise. I'm talking about if you've believed for the last 6 weeks that Duke is the number 1 team in the country, does one game make you decide that they're not the number 1 team? And to me, that's where I think the SP sits. I don't think Duke is no longer the number 1 team just because they lost a game. I still think if we were to go head-to-head, would you take Duke over Texas? I would. Would you take Duke over Villanova? I would. Would you take Duke over Alabama? I would. And if that is still the answer, despite the loss, I don't think there's a justification to move them out of number 1. Meanwhile,
the converse argument for that is then that means there's situations where a loss doesn't penalize you. So you're saying there's a world where you can take a loss then and you not get penalized. And Duke has been the only team in all of college basketball who has taken a loss this season and not got penalized because of that. That sounds like a lot of glazing to me. They're the only team
because they're
the only team in college basketball who has taken a loss and not receive repercussions for the following week in the SP25 because of it.
They've been so much better than the rest of college basketball, Rick. Like, it's not like they were sitting like Iowa is, who just lost and fell, who was sitting at 7, 9, 10, who's been moving up and down the entire time. Duke's lost twice all season. They did face repercussions when they lost earlier in the year. They did fall. And now if they had won and they were now 19-1, we wouldn't feel any different. We've talked about this multiple times. We're not overreacting to one loss and letting that suddenly cloud the opinion of everything. I don't suddenly think Iowa has the sky falling because they lost their last game. Meanwhile, Duke has been head and shoulders better than the rest of college basketball. They have one slip up at home. To me, I think that this makes sense. I think we're probably going to see more of this for teams that have proven to be consistent. Like if Texas, Villanova, or Alabama were to lose a game, I don't think that you would see them falling down the standings in the same way that you see a team like Georgia Tech or Kentucky who now have 4 losses on the season, and each of them lost 2 in a row. These are teams that have proven throughout the season, their track record is we win basketball games. One loss, you still have the best winning percentage in college basketball. Should not move Duke out of number 1.
But it's already happened for Alabama. They had to climb their way back up to number 3. They got dropped tremendously after one loss. So again, the argument you're making is fine. The argument you're making is fine if you're going to be consistent.
They have a lot of sample size. You can't argue consistency when you don't have sample size. The beginning of the season is notorious for moving around the records because we don't know who a team is. We are 20 games into the regular season. We know who these teams are. So if Alabama were to lose another game, I wouldn't sit here and say, are they better than Virginia Tech? Are they better than Arkansas? And say outright, no way, because they've put this together. Virginia Tech has won 15 straight games. They would have a viable case to move up ahead of them. But the teams behind Duke, Texas and Villanova, have not proven to be immediately better based off one loss by Duke. Now, if Duke loses again, yeah, they're probably losing that number 1 spot. They would, in my opinion. But just because you lost one game and still have a better record, even though it's not down to record, and you have a better track record throughout the season of being the number 1 team in the country, does not warrant a loss. This is college basketball. This isn't SWFL. This isn't college football, where one loss does actually matter because the sample size of games is so much smaller. We've played 20 college basketball games. I would challenge you to say, is Texas better than Duke right now? Is Villanova better than Duke?
I think they have a case right now.
They have a case. That's it, Rick. That's it. You said they have a case, but you didn't say they won.
Subjective. It's all subjective. So you're basically saying everybody else has a case, but Duke is head and shoulders, bar none. Yeah, not the number 1 team in the country. That's your opinion. That is your opinion. And Florida State just showed we're nowhere near the top 25. We just beat them at home. So you can't no longer say
25s. It's not an opinion, Rick. You want to argue records? Well, guess what? Duke is still 18-2, and that's a better record than the teams below them.
So is Alabama.
Okay. So then your argument is Alabama statistics. So is Alabama better than Texas and Villanova?
Moves for Duke and not for anyone else.
You're making it move.
No,
because you have 2 different arguments. You said, let's just stay to Duke. Is it opinion or is it statistical? Which one would you like to argue, Rick? Because if it's statistical, Duke has the best record in college basketball. If it's opinion, that's the whole freaking point of the top 25. They're tied for the best record in college
basketball.
Okay, but that doesn't change. Oh, good. Okay, go kiss your sister because you're tied. The record is still the best. So if you would like to argue record, Rick, they're the number 1 team in the country. If you would like to argue opinion, that's exactly what the top 25 is. And guess what? They're number 1 in the country. Stop making this conspiracy tinfoil hat bull crap that you want to put on every time when something doesn't go your way. It's the same crap that we get with the Lakers.
It's not my
every
team.
Time we get with the Lakers, with the Yankees. But you're acting like it is, and you're acting like this is some conspiracy theory to put Duke at number 1. But yet, every time you make the argument, it's either record-wise, they're number 1. Opinion-wise, that's the point of the top 25. We'll find out at the end of the season.
Here's my last point.
We're running out of time.
Here's my last point. Duke is the only team that has taken a loss and did not.
Guess what? They were also the last team to get to 2 losses.
I'm saying a fact. These are facts. That is a fact.
That's a great fact, Rick.
That's a fact.
They're also the last team to get to 2 losses.
We gotta move on.
No, you wanted to keep this thing going. You were the last team to get to 2 losses. So why don't you go ahead and make the argument that somehow that's a negative, that they got their second loss later than every other program in the nation.
Losing can't be positive.
To SEC. They've been positive plenty. Let's move to the SEC, where Kentucky and Mississippi State sit near the bottom of the rankings, despite sitting in the top 15 in the SP top 25 rankings. Kentucky 14-4, but 1-2 overall. 14-5 5 is Mississippi State, and 1 and 2 overall. Are they dead in the SEC in the pursuit of getting a top 2 seed?
No. It's the SEC. It's a dogfight. Like, it's the if there's any conference that you can say any one of the teams can win it, it's the SEC. Right now, you have Arkansas at the top with 14-5, and then Kentucky is at 14-4. Like, but now you're talking to now they need to play better conference wise. Yes, they're 1 and 2, but I'm not going to say Kentucky is dead or out the water right now.
In the SEC, we're talking about the SEC.
No. Well, statistically, statistically they have they do need Arkansas and South Carolina to lose some games because right now statistically they're down. They're 2 games down in the loss column, and these guys are undefeated. So in the SEC, statistically, they almost mathematically eliminate.
I'm not talking mathematically. I'm talking about, do you think they're dead? Because apparently you don't care about mathematics. I can't figure out what you value more, mathematics or opinion. But are they dead? Mathematically, we know. In your opinion, are they dead in the SEC?
Duke, I mean, Kentucky, no. There's too much talent. Mississippi State, yeah, you can go ahead and take them out to pasture. I don't think they have enough to because what has to happen is you have to basically win out and hope those guys start to lose. I don't know. I don't think Mississippi can just win out. I think another loss is probably on the horizon for Mississippi State. But for Kentucky, I expect them moving forward to just win out the rest of those conference games. Now they need some help from the other guys, but I expect them to win out.
Here's the challenge right now for Kentucky. One of your 2 losses is to Alabama. So despite the fact that you are 1 game behind Alabama in the standings, and Alabama's currently number 3, you are technically 2 games back because the head-to-head. Now they do play Alabama again later on April 3rd, but that's just the context. If Alabama wins that matchup, which is in Tuscaloosa, that's going to shift the tide fully to the Tide. I think that the fact that South Carolina is currently the number 2 team, and we have not seen them over the course of the season be a dominant squad that can rip off 15 straight wins, which is potentially needed, keeps hope alive for both Mississippi State and Kentucky. I think if one more loss from either of them, and I know the mathematics of it, I would rule them out. But the saving grace right now is that it's not Alabama and Arkansas sitting at the top of the SEC. It's Alabama and South Carolina. Or excuse me, it's Arkansas and South Carolina. If South Carolina turns out to be a different program than what we've seen up until this point, which is a 13-7 squad that has been up and down, inconsistent, in and out of the tail end of the top 25, then if they become that top 15, top 12 type of program, then I think it's you're dead in the water because, to your point, you've got to start reeling off a bunch of wins. Until that happens, though, and until South Carolina proves to be different than what they've proven over the first 20 games, the door is still open for Kentucky and even Mississippi State. I mean, Mississippi State's probably taken the biggest heat here, former top 10 team that fell probably too far in the top 25 rankings as they started to climb their way back up. They're up to number 12 now. Again, small sample size. And hey, lesson learned by the old geezers. All right, let's get to the top 10 plays, which happened over the weekend. Those were released on Sunday. Let's get rolling with number 10. We're headed out to California to start things off, where Jalen Snow gets dirty with it in a matchup against the Washington Huskies. Number 10, Jalen Snow, our top 10 play of the week. Gets a little pick and roll action, step back 3, probably had to drive if he wanted it, made it more difficult. Buckets.
And at number 9, we're going to go to TCU. His mama named him Nene. I'm sorry, we're going to prep. I'm sorry, Jordan Washington. I skipped the gun. Jordan Washington prep basketball to put back. Jordan Washington with the dunk. Number 9.
Headed in at number 8, Raheem Dandridge. How about a little up and ins? Don't get much Seton Hall action, but this is some for you. Big bucket in the Big East.
Now we're going to TCU. Where his mama named him Nene. I'm going to call him Nene. Nene Gibson going baseline, and it's hammer time. He pulling out the stick.
Cooper Flagg couldn't get the win. He could get the highlight, though, as the matchup against FSU early in this one, rising up for the alley-oop for the Duke Blue Devils.
Duke DeVille, that's cute. At number 5, we're going to some Big East action. Marcus lay a flat, or lay a font, or lay it down on you.
They say you're supposed to be able to see the basket when you make one. Khalil Erickson says he does not subscribe to that mentality, driving in on the road against Cal. No look bucket.
He makes one of those every game. At number 3, we're going to Las Vegas. UNLV, my man, Nasty Nat Hawkins, courtesy of Beauchamp with the alley and the oop. That's nasty, Nat. That is nasty.
Let's stay with the Running Rebels for number 2, where Taz Cooper, somebody must have said something to tick him off ahead of their matchup with the Zags, because he rises with anger for the number 2 spot in the top 10.
And number 1 in the hood, G, we're going to South Carolina. We just talked about my man Keon Baldridge. He's going to wash his clothes in this man's spin cycle. Watch his baseline. Oh, got you, coach. Got him. Lay him down nice and soft on that pillow. Top 10.
Those are our top 10 plays. We are signing off for the show here. We're back on SimWorld TV tonight, though. 6:30 action. Virginia and Florida State. Florida State trying to follow up their big win against Duke at home against Johnny Baldwin and the Cavaliers. And then Tuesday action rolls on CBS, Texas Tech and Texas at 8, and at 9:30 UCLA, Arizona. And don't forget our game of the week coming up on Thursday, Arkansas hosting Kentucky. Big opportunity for the Wildcats to try to chase down the top spot in the SEC, currently owned by a top 10 squad in the Arkansas Razorbacks. That is, again, Thursday at 8 p.m. All right, that's our show. We're coming back tomorrow morning. All-Star break underway in SWBA, so a big college hoops day ahead. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you here tomorrow. SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.